"Oh my gosh, Mark. You're still the best in the whole world." Tracy squealed with delight. Her words felt like good news and bad news. The compliment hit me like a blow to the head, and I abruptly froze, sucking in air like a vacuum cleaner. Wait a minute. We've been married for 29 years. She shouldn't even remember what any other man is like, let alone say it out loud, especially not during an intimate moment. My God, Mark, you know exactly how to turn my world upside down, Tracy exclaimed again, still breathless. I didn't move. I just lay there, my head resting on her left thigh. Tracy stayed still too, catching her breath. 30 seconds passed. Did she have any idea what she had just said? "Aren't you going to continue?" she asked, her voice puzzled. "No, I'm tired, baby. You took all my strength," I replied, forcing a smile. She leaned over, kissed me softly, and lay back down. That's usually how it ended. Some cuddling, a bit of conversation, and then heading to the bathroom to clean up. But tonight was different. As Tracy drifted off, her breathing turned soft and rhythmic. I quietly got up, went to the bathroom to clean myself up, and then headed downstairs to my wine cabinet. Sometimes having an above-average IQ feels like a curse. Most men would have been too distracted by the moment to even notice what their wife was saying. But not me. As I sat in my robe, sipping a glass of Staley's rye whiskey, I replayed the moment over and over in my mind. Had I missed something? Were there signs I should have seen? But nothing seemed out of the ordinary, except for one thing. Tracy and I had been more passionate in the last 6 months than we had been in years. I chalked it up to the fact that our youngest had left for college, and for the first time in 25 years we were finally alone. Tracy had also been on a health kick. In those 6 months, she'd lost 20 pounds and was back to her college weight of 120 pounds. 51, she looked incredible. Tracy has always been beautiful, with flawless skin inherited from her mother, who still looked great at 78. Even before the weight loss, Tracy had a figure most women would envy. Perfect breasts, a small waist, and great legs for her height. Now, she was dressing to show off her transformation, and honestly, who could blame her? But tonight's comment? That was something else entirely. When we first met in college, Tracy had been just as vibrant and flirty as she is now. We started dating as sophomores and got married 2 years later, at 22. Her confidence has always come from her looks. Blonde, blue-eyed, and effortlessly stunning. Tracy has always been a little flirty, but I'd never thought she would cross a line. Until now. She probably thinks her looks are enough to keep any man wrapped around her finger. And for most of her life they have been. Even now, her co-workers seem powerless to resist her charm. Take what happened 6 months ago. Tracy, a top sales agent at Midland Realty, had walked into the company break room where Rhonda Nichols, another agent, was talking to Carl Walters. Tracy didn't even join their conversation. She just smiled as she walked by. But that was enough. Carl turned his head, following her with his eyes, completely ignoring Rhonda mid-sentence. Later, I heard that Rhonda had been furious, muttering snide comments about Tracy's cheesecake, but behind her back. Tracy found it amusing. This was nothing new to her. She's been turning heads since she was 14. But I could tell Rhonda's words had struck a nerve. Tracy may be confident, but she knows she's not the same as she was at 20. Still, even Rhonda couldn't deny the truth. Tracy looks incredible for her age, and she knows it. Carl, the new agent in the office, is a perfect example of her effect on men. At 28, Carl was a former starting linebacker at Ohio State. He still looked the part, 6 feet 4 inches, 230 pounds, and incredibly handsome. He was always well-dressed, and Tracy had mentioned how the women in the office, including Rhonda, couldn't stop fawning over him. Not that it mattered. Rhonda was already engaged to someone else, but that didn't seem to stop her from caring about Carl's attention. And now, here I was, sitting in my kitchen at 2 a.m., wondering, was I just another pawn in Tracy's game? Was she still mine, or was her attention drifting elsewhere? Tracy's confidence has always been one of the things I admire most about her. But tonight, her words left me questioning everything. For the first time in 29 years, I felt unsure. Tracy skipped lunch with the girls that day and went straight to the gym near her office, signing up for a membership. She was determined to make Rhonda pay dearly for her little indiscretion. Mrs. Cheesecake, but, we'll see about that, Tracy thought as she got back into her car and drove off. Meanwhile, I sat in my den nursing my third drink, my thoughts scattered all over the place. I found myself transported back to the time when Tracy and I first met at a large Midwestern university. Back then, I was a nerd with a knack for mathematics, not exactly the guy you'd expect to date a goddess. And that's exactly what Tracy was, a goddess. Sure, I worked out regularly and wasn't unattractive, but let's face it, goddesses don't date geeks in real life. I knew who she was, of course, everyone did, but I never dared to speak to her. There were always plenty of guys orbiting her, hoping to be her next boyfriend. Then one night, at a party, something unexpected happened. I was sitting quietly in the corner, sipping a beer and lost in my own thoughts, when someone plopped down in the empty seat next to me. I turned my head, and to my shock, it was her, the goddess from my dreams. "So, are you homosexual or bisexual?" she asked, completely catching me off guard. "It's okay, man. I'm not against either. But you've got to be one or the other. There hasn't been a single straight guy who hasn't tried to hit on me since I was 15, and I don't see a ring on your finger. So what is it?" I felt my face flush a deep red as I stammered out some kind of reply, completely flustered. She was stunning up close, her beauty even more disarming than it was from across a room. I could feel my heart pounding, and my brain, usually my greatest strength, turned to mush. "So that's how it is," she said, smirking as her gaze dropped to my lap. "No," I finally managed to croak. "Neither one. I didn't think you'd have time for someone like me. You've got all those handsome guys lined up waiting for you." She smiled, leaning back slightly. "Well, you don't put yourself out there, honey. Sometimes we women like our men to be a little mysterious." That night, we left the party together. A few years later, we got married shortly after graduating from university. I knew what I was getting into. I wasn't naive. I was well aware that Tracy's number was higher than mine when we got together. But I also knew my way around a bedroom, and I made sure she was more than satisfied. Our first night together, I turned her into a trembling mess. I was confident in my abilities, even if other parts of our relationship felt out of my control. And yet, here we were, nearly 3 decades later, and everything felt different. Tracy's campaign to seduce Carl Walters began in earnest 2 weeks after the break room incident. She and Carl started working on a deal together, which gave her the perfect excuse to invite him to dinner. On the surface, it seemed professional enough. She had often taken other agents out to discuss work. As the senior agent and top producer in the office, Tracy was used to paying for these kinds of meals. But this time was different. She made sure that Rhonda knew exactly about the dinner. Tracy kept things professional at first, working through the details of the deal. Business was business, and a payday was a payday. But once that was settled, she flipped the switch. Over a bottle of wine, she learned everything there was to know about Carl, his football days, his personal life, and even his relationship status. He admitted to having a girlfriend but casually mentioned that they weren't exclusive. Perfect. As they talked, Tracy leaned in closer, brushing Carl's arm and wrist several times. Her forest green blazer was unbuttoned, revealing a tight, crisp white blouse that hugged her chest just enough to emphasize her figure. She leaned forward strategically during the conversation, giving Carl more than just her words to focus on. At one point, she glanced quickly at his lap and smirked to herself. So easy with men, she thought. He's mine. He just doesn't know it yet. When I lose another 5 pounds, I'll give him his gift. The private investigator I hired was worth every penny, even though it meant canceling the Hawaii vacation I had been planning. The report he gave me shattered whatever illusions I had left. Tracy wasn't just having a fling with Carl Walters. She was also involved with Fred Lazarus and, worse, her trainer at the gym. As I sat there, reading the PI's report, I couldn't help but wonder if even he had fallen for her charms. He seemed nervous delivering the news, almost like he was afraid I'd shoot the messenger. The irony wasn't lost on me. While I'm not the stereotypical nerd anymore, I've kept an eclectic group of friends over the years. One of my oldest and most trusted friends is Martin Boland, a lawyer. Like me, Martin is a bit of a geek, but he's a shark in the courtroom. If there's one person I know I can count on, it's him. He's the kind of guy who can't snap a pencil in half but will happily crush someone's soul to win a case. Tracy knew she couldn't face real consequences for her adultery because we didn't live in a state where infidelity was legally punishable. So, she could comfortably hide behind the veil of irreconcilable differences. That didn't make it any less infuriating. Her affair with Fred Lazarus, Rhonda's fiancé, was meant to be a one-time thing, a calculated act of revenge. Rhonda had dared to call Tracy's body a cheesecake butt, and Tracy wanted to teach her a lesson by giving her fiancé a taste of a real woman's body. Fred was never supposed to be more than a pawn in Tracy's game. However, it turned out Fred wasn't just young. He was exceptionally skilled in bed, far beyond what Tracy had expected. That night, she decided Fred would be much more than a one-time indulgence. She planned to find reasons to keep him around, even if it meant crafting more excuses for why she had to be away. As for me, my feelings didn't matter to her anymore. Darren Tremble, the gym trainer, wasn't part of Tracy's plan either at first. She admired his muscular physique during her workouts, but she had no intention of crossing that line. That changed one day when Darren gave her a one-on-one session. While demonstrating an exercise, he placed his strong hands on her shoulders. Tracy felt an undeniable tingling sensation, and in a moment of boldness, she pushed her hips back slightly, brushing against him. Darren didn't hesitate. Within 15 minutes, the two of them were tangled in each other in his tiny flat, tearing off their workout clothes with the urgency of a couple on their honeymoon. Tracy arrived home from Darren's apartment about 30 minutes later than usual. Still dressed in her workout clothes, she quickly showered and started dinner before I got home. But I'd already noticed something was off. That evening, she barely greeted me when I walked in. She practically bolted upstairs, muttering about needing to wash the sweat off her body. It might have worked as an excuse, if I hadn't already known the truth. The private investigator's report had made it clear, and while Tracy might have thought she was untouchable, I knew exactly what was going on. Later that evening, we were both home. Tracy was putting away the dishes after dinner while I sat in the living room watching TV. The doorbell rang, and she called out for me to answer it. But after checking through the window, I saw it was the process server. Calmly, I called back, "Why don't you get it yourself?" She chuckled at my laziness and opened the door. Moments later, she staggered back into the living room, holding a large manila envelope. Her face turned pale as she opened it and scanned the contents. "What the hell?" she hissed at me, her voice sharp. "How could you do this to me? What about our family? You're just upset that I pulled the trigger before you did," I said, my voice steady but full of emotion. "Let's be honest. If I hadn't filed for divorce, it would have been you." Her face flushed, and her anger boiled over. "You don't love me anymore," she spat. "You haven't loved me in years." I took a deep breath and replied, "I understand. That's been clear for a long time now. But don't think I don't know what you've been doing. I know about the others, at least some of them." Her face twisted in confusion and anger. "You think you know something?" she snapped. "Then go ahead and say it. I'm all ears." I reached into my pocket, pulling out a small piece of paper. "Carl Walters, Fred Lazarus, and Darren Tremble," I said, listing their names one by one. Tracy's expression changed again, this time resembling someone who had been punched in the gut. She sank into the sofa across from me, the fight momentarily leaving her. Up until that moment, I think she'd been confident that I only had suspicions, not concrete proof. Now she knew better. "Well, maybe if you were more of a man, we wouldn't be having this conversation," she shot back, her tone dripping with venom. I shouldn't have been surprised by her attack. Having affairs with 3 men behind my back must have given her a huge boost to her ego. Still, her words stung. "It's not my fault I'm getting older," I sighed. But apparently 29 years of marriage wasn't enough to earn me even a little loyalty. Hell, none of those guys were even alive when we got married. Tracy's eyebrows shot up at my words. Her expression shifted again, this time into something resembling fear. She looked like she wanted to argue but held herself back. I decided it was time to end this. "I'll let you stay in the house until we can sell it," I said quietly, my voice firm. "But you'll explain everything to the kids and your parents. That's your responsibility." I stood up, walked to the hallway closet, and pulled out 2 packed suitcases. Tracy stared at me, frozen. She definitely hadn't seen this coming. "I'll come back in a few days to get the rest of my things. Hire your own lawyer. Decide what you want to do. And call Marty if you want to discuss logistics. I don't care about you anymore. So let's do this quickly and get it over with," Tracy had hissed as I left the house. I wasn't sure what she had thrown against the wall as I walked out with my suitcases, but it crashed loudly. Although I knew Tracy had been planning to divorce me for a while, I could tell she hadn't expected it to happen like this. She wasn't ready to take the step herself just yet. In her mind, she was still figuring out how to twist everything so I would look like the bad guy. She knew I was well liked by our friends, and it wouldn't take long for people to side with me if they heard the truth. As for the kids, she planned to be more direct, attacking my masculinity and trying to convince them that her need for mind-blowing intimacy several times a week justified her actions. What Tracy didn't realize was that she had been the leak all along. Her behavior had betrayed her. Despite her efforts to control the narrative, she was taken aback by how well I was holding up. She had expected me to be devastated when she finally served me with divorce papers, but instead, I seemed almost relieved. That clearly unsettled her. I was proud of myself when I left the house with my 2 suitcases. I could tell Tracy hadn't anticipated the way things unfolded. I had taken control of the situation, and for the first time in a long time, I felt like I had a firm grip on my own life. I drove to the nearest motel, checked in, and decided it was time to start over. The divorce proceedings, however, weren't without their challenges. Tracy fought tooth and nail over one particular aspect, the reason for the divorce. She wanted me to change the grounds from adultery to irreconcilable differences. It wasn't about the money. She would still get 50% of everything, but I knew her motives. She planned to spin the story to the kids and her parents, painting me as the villain. By keeping adultery on the record, I had leverage, and she hated it. "There's no reason for everyone to know about our personal affairs," she yelled at me one evening over the phone. "Just change the statement to irreconcilable differences, and I'll sign the papers immediately." "Tracy," I replied calmly, I may be a geek, but I'm not stupid. Your logic here is as transparent as glass. I won't give you the chance to twist the truth. If anyone decides to check the court records, they'll see exactly why this marriage ended. You're the one who entertained other men while we were still married. You made your bed. Now you can lie in it. Her voice sharpened. You don't have to make this worse than it already is. All you had to do was respect me enough to end the marriage before you started sleeping with other men. Instead, you've earned yourself a scarlet letter. Tracy retaliated by trying to humiliate me. She spread rumors that I was weak in bed, something I heard from a couple of friends whose wives had passed the gossip along. I think she believed the humiliation would force me to concede. What hurt most, though, was when my youngest daughter, Allison, accused me of stalking Tracy to ease my bruised ego. If your mother wants to play dirty, fine. Let's talk about it. I told Allison when she confronted me in my apartment. I'm guessing she's already told you about her affair? She nodded reluctantly. Well, what she probably didn't mention is that she wasn't with just one guy. She's been with 3. I held up 3 fingers to make it clear. 3, Allison. Guys who are practically your age. Her eyes widened in shock, and she started to stammer. 3? No. That's not possible. Oh, it's very possible, I said, my voice steady. This isn't about me, Allison. This is about your mother. I don't care if she doesn't love me anymore. That's fine. But she didn't need to sleep with 3 men, and certainly not men who should be dating you, not her. Allison stood frozen in the kitchen, tears welling in her eyes. I had never spoken so harshly to her before, nor had I ever said anything negative about Tracy in front of her. She burst into tears and staggered out of my apartment, leaving me standing there, torn between anger and regret. It took all my willpower to let her go without running after her to comfort her. 20 minutes later, my phone rang. It was Tracy's mother, Barb. We hadn't spoken since I filed for divorce, though we'd once had a great relationship. How could you say such horrible things to my granddaughter, you idiot? She yelled the moment I answered. She used to worship the ground you walked on, and now she's lying on my couch crying her eyes out. How could you say such terrible things about Tracy? Mom, please, I replied, keeping my voice calm. Listen for a second. Obviously, you've only heard one side of the story, Tracy's. You should know there are 3 men involved. And if you don't believe me, I have proof. There was a pause on the other end of the line. I could hear Barb inhaling sharply, as though trying to steady herself. Proof? What kind of proof? Photos, videos, the whole package, I said quietly. I wasn't planning on using the nuclear option, but apparently your daughter thinks scorched earth is the way to go. Barb exhaled sharply. Oh my God, Mark, are you serious? 3 men. Yes, 3, I confirmed. I'm not making this up. Barb's voice softened. I'll talk to her. Oh, Mark, I'm so sorry. Really, I am. She hung up quietly, leaving me alone with my thoughts. I shook my head as I put the phone down. Barb had always been a kind, supportive woman, and I could tell she was shaken by what I told her. Part of me wondered if this would change anything, but at least now someone else knew the truth. Barb had always been like a mother to me since my dad passed away 12 years ago. I could talk to her about anything, share my problems, and count on her for advice. But now, not only were we not talking, but I had crushed her soul by revealing that her daughter was both cruel and reckless, and I had physical evidence to back it up. The divorce was eventually granted on the grounds of adultery, though it took nearly a year. I suspected Tracy continued to entertain her 3 young boys during that time, but I didn't care to confirm. I wasn't watching her anymore. I had moved on. For me, life had taken an interesting turn. About a month after filing for divorce, Women from the university's science department started showing up at my office in the math building to check on me. They came separately, offering words of concern and sympathy. These women had worked on campus for years, but I barely knew them. I don't think I'd said more than 10 words to either of them the entire time they'd been there. Still, it was nice of them to stop by. They even left their phone numbers in case I ever needed someone to talk to. I'll admit, both women were attractive, one divorced and in her 50s, the other widowed in her 40s. I was confused about why they suddenly seemed so interested, but I shrugged it off. Over the next few weeks, visits like this became a regular occurrence. Women from all over campus stopped by to check on my well-being. It was flattering, though baffling. One day, as I was leaving my office, Colleen, the administrative secretary for the mathematics department, passed by and gave me a sly smile. Colleen was 35, divorced, and had curves in all the right places. Her raven hair and piercing green eyes had always caught my attention, but I'd never thought much of it. That day, though, something about her stood out. For the first time, I really noticed how beautiful she was. "Okay, Colleen," I said, raising an eyebrow. "Spit it out. What's going on with everyone lately? Did I inherit some money I don't know about?" She laughed, almost mockingly. "You seriously don't have a clue, do you?" "Nope, not a clue." Colleen leaned in slightly, her green eyes sparkling. "It's because of your recent weight loss, Mark," she said, holding up her left hand and wiggling her fingers for emphasis, particularly her ring finger. "You recently lost 120 pounds. Took me a second to realize what she meant. My wedding ring. You've always been known as a sweet, kind guy," she continued. "But you were off limits because you were married. Everyone knew how devoted you were to your wife. But now that your ring's gone, let's just say it's hunting season. There may be a lot of guys out there, but not a lot of good ones. You've suddenly become a rare commodity. Smart, kind, good-looking, and lonely." I stared at her, a little taken aback. "Wait, so people know about the divorce?" Colleen smirked. "Oh, honey, word spreads fast on campus. I don't know who saw the divorce papers, but within hours, everyone knew. And trust me, they're all lining up to let you know they're available when you are." I chuckled nervously, still processing. "Well, I'm flattered, but the divorce isn't finalized yet. I won't be a free man for a few more months." Colleen gave me a knowing look. "Everyone just wants to make sure you know they're interested when the time comes." Then, with a playful grin, she added, "By the way, I'm applying for the position of Dr. Robertson's girlfriend. Just putting that out there." I blinked, feeling both amused and flustered. Okay. I'll put your application in the queue," I replied, fumbling for words. Colleen laughed as she walked away. "You're so charming, Mark. Tracy doesn't know what she's losing." Tracy, meanwhile, had been under the false assumption that I would keep our personal affairs private. She knew I was angry, but she didn't think I was the type to talk about it. She believed she could keep her affairs and the divorce quiet for a while. That belief, however, was proven wrong within 2 weeks. By the time the divorce was finalized nearly a year later, everyone knew the truth. "Are you insane?" Marge Shambo, Tracy's oldest and closest friend, yelled into the phone one day. "How could you let the sweetest guy in the world leave you?" Tracy was stunned. "How did you already find out?" she thought, though she kept her composure. Marge lived 2 hours away in Tracy's hometown, and Tracy had assumed she wouldn't need to tell her friends and family for at least a few more months. Clearly, someone in Tracy's family had spilled the beans. "It's a long story, Marge," Tracy began cautiously, trying to figure out how to spin the truth. "Well, I heard most of it from your mom," Marge interrupted. She broke down crying in the middle of Walmart last week. I had to drag her to the car before she completely lost it. Tracy's heart sank. Barb, her mother, had been almost like a second mom to Marge since the two became friends in second grade. Tracy had hoped Barb would keep the situation quiet, but apparently, she had underestimated the emotional toll. You cheated on a wonderful boyfriend, a wonderful husband, a wonderful father, and a wonderful provider, because he got older and you thought you deserved better? Marge's voice rose with each word, sharp and unforgiving. Have you even thought about this? You're about to be an old woman yourself, Tracy. You're not exactly the same person you were at 30 either. Marge, it's not like that, Tracy began weakly. Oh, spare me, Marge snapped. I always knew you had a selfish streak, but I never thought you'd show it to Mark. He loved you, Tracy, and you threw it away for what? A few young guys? A little excitement. Tracy was silent. For once, she didn't have a clever response. Mark sat alone in his apartment on the night the divorce became official. His dinner consisted of a small salad, and he washed it down with half a bottle of Buffalo Trace bourbon. Meanwhile, Tracy spent her evening at a fancy dinner with Carl. Afterward, they went back to his house. A scene they had repeated countless times over the past year. But for some reason, Tracy found herself unable to keep the spark alive. She didn't like what was happening, but admitting that to herself or worse to Carl was out of the question. When it was over, she told Carl she was tired and needed to go home. She carefully removed his hands from her chest, got dressed, and left. Sitting alone in her car, Tracy couldn't shake the sinking feeling that her first official night as a divorced woman had been a failure. I have a genius IQ. I can crack passwords in my head and read 4 books at the same time. But when it comes to understanding women, I'm completely clueless, I told Judy Scully, a longtime friend of both Tracy and me. During dinner 2 weeks after the divorce became official, I had chosen Judy for my first date because she was someone I trusted, and I didn't want any misunderstandings. Judy was an artist, and I'd always admired her unique way of thinking. She was a few years younger than me and kept herself fit with yoga and regular stretching. Her smooth, youthful skin belied her age, and her dark brown hair framed her striking blue eyes, the kind of eyes that seemed to look straight into your soul. I couldn't help but notice how beautiful she was. For the first time, my mind wandered to what she might look like without clothes, in my bed. I was hoping you'd call eventually, Mark, she said with a warm smile. But honestly, I didn't think I'd be number 1 on your list. I'm honored. I chuckled nervously. Well, I thought I had you girls figured out, but apparently I was fooling myself for 30 years. So, what should I do next? Judy's smile widened. How about we don't waste time talking about you and Tracy? That's coffee chat material. Tonight, let's just be 2 adults living our own lives. Let's see what happens. I nodded in agreement. You're right. You can't move forward if you're too busy looking back. I stood up, leaned toward her, and planted what I hoped was a confident kiss on her lips. To my surprise, Judy leaned over the table and kissed me back. Hard. Her kiss was intense, passionate, and completely unexpected. I nearly choked as she finally let me come up for air. Before that night, I had never thought of Judy in an intimate way. Sure, she was beautiful and I could appreciate her body, but when I was married to Tracy, a woman I considered a goddess, I never lusted after anyone else. Now, however, everything had changed. I'd been out of the game for decades and it showed. I don't think my face returned to its normal color until the end of the meal. We finished our dinner with a slice of cheesecake and coffee. As we sipped, Judy leaned in, her blue eyes locking with mine. I think we should go back to my house for a real nightcap, she said, her voice soft but purposeful. If I'm not mistaken, You haven't been with anyone since you left Tracy. I'd like to be your first, after the Queen. Her words caught me off guard. I knew she was right. It had been a long time. And honestly, I was scared. What if I didn't last long? What if I needed more time to recover? I wasn't 21 anymore. And since Judy was a friend to both Tracy and me, what if word got out? I could already hear the whispers. Dr. Marklin Robertson, genius professor of computational physics, is a failure in bed. It was enough to make me break out in a cold sweat. When we got to Judy's house, she made us coffee and excused herself to change into something more comfortable. My head was spinning. I didn't know what to expect, but I certainly wasn't prepared for what walked back into the room. Judy returned wearing a soft, thin robe that barely reached her mid-thigh. Her nipples pressed against the fabric, making it clear she wasn't wearing a bra. I felt a surge of interest, more than a little if I'm being honest. We sat together on her couch, chatting innocently and sipping our coffee. I tried my best not to stare or let my mind wander too much. But at some point, I must have zoned out because I heard her voice, soft and teasing, pull me back to reality. "Mark, wake up," Judy said, her voice cutting through the haze in my brain. I blinked, realizing I had been staring at her. My hand shook slightly as she carefully took the coffee cup from me and set it on the table. Then, without a word, she took my hand and led me to her bedroom. I wasn't fully present when she began undressing me. Her hands moved slowly, purposefully. My heart raced as my brain finally kicked into gear. "Wait! Slow down," I whispered. "It's been a long time. I'm not quite ready for it all to end quickly." Judy smiled, her voice gentle. "Mark, I understand. We can take our time. We can do this again. I'm patient, but not that patient." Despite my nerves, everything went well. Better than I had expected, honestly. As we lay side by side on the bed, looking into each other's eyes, she half laughed, half teased. "Did you seriously have to be that irresistible?" Judy asked, her voice soft but playful. "Well, yeah," I replied, grinning. "That's what I'm here for, isn't it?" I replied as Judy shifted closer to me, turning her back so I could wrap my arms around her. We fell asleep like that, and I slept like a log for the first time in months. Hours later, I woke up to the wonderful feeling of Judy pressed against me. "Good morning, Sonia," I teased with a grin. Judy chuckled softly, her voice still warm from sleep. "Good morning to you, too." She turned over to look me in the eyes, her expression full of satisfaction. "You are incomparable, honey." A month later, Tracy met Judy for lunch at one of their favorite spots. Tracy had called and invited her, and though they were friends in their own right, Judy knew this meeting had a specific purpose: to talk about her time with Tracy's ex-husband. Judy had met Mark a few times before and suspected this wasn't just a casual catch-up. The first 10 minutes were polite, filled with small talk about recent events and updates on each other's children. But then Tracy fired her opening salvo. "Lots of dates lately, Judy? Really? I thought you didn't exercise anymore," Tracy said, her tone sweet but laced with a subtle purr. She took a slow sip of her margarita, her eyes glinting as she waited for Judy's reaction. Judy felt herself blush despite her preparation for this moment. She had expected Tracy's probing questions, but the conversation was already feeling more personal than she had anticipated. What was supposed to be a one-time way of satisfying her curiosity about Mark had turned into something much deeper. Mark had completely rocked her world. "This man sure is a master," Judy thought to herself. Finally, she decided to ask, "Is he always this good?" She sounded more like an awkward teenager than her usual confident self. Tracy raised her eyebrows, clearly puzzled by Judy's glowing review. In Tracy's mind, Mark wouldn't have gone all out for a mistress the way he had for his wife. Surely, the experience with Judy had been mediocre at best. But Judy's flushed cheeks and shining eyes told a different story. Moments later, Judy confirmed it outright, unable to keep it in. "How could you let this man leave your life? Are you crazy? Smart, handsome, sweet, and damned skilled." Tracy's smile vanished. Her hand trembled slightly as she reached for her margarita, taking a long sip to compose herself. She raised her eyebrows slightly in response, but it was clear she hadn't expected this conversation to go in this direction. Quickly, she steered the conversation to another topic, but Judy saw through the attempt to change the subject. Still, Judy decided to let Tracy have control of the conversation. She didn't want to rub her own luck in Tracy's face, at least not overtly. A different kind of luck found me several weeks later, in the form of Molly Hamilton. She was pressed against my right side, her hand resting on my chest as she slept, her breathing rhythmic and soft. We had just finished a wild session that was anything but romantic. I felt tired, sticky, sore, and like $1,000,000. If I live to be 100, I'll never understand women. My ex-wife cheated on me because I couldn't give her what she needed. Yet here I was, having slept with my third woman in as many months, feeling like I had just delivered the best performance of my life. Molly, a 32-year-old with a toned, athletic body, had screamed like a banshee and nearly passed out. Molly was a physician assistant who worked at an orthopedic clinic. I met her at the gym of all places. I noticed her because she wasn't there to show off or flirt. She was there to work hard. Her messy ponytail, sweat-soaked face, and grunts of effort as she powered through her workout caught my attention. She was completely focused, and that's what made her stand out. I waited until she finished her workout and headed toward the locker room before cautiously approaching her. "Hi, I'm Mark," I said, introducing myself. "Would it be okay if I invited you out for coffee or dessert sometime?" Molly hesitated for a moment, her green eyes narrowing slightly as she considered my offer. Then I saw her expression soften, and the corners of her lips curved into a smile. "Sure," she said. "Why don't you give me your number?" We exchanged numbers, smiling at each other like teenagers. As she turned to leave, I couldn't help but admire her figure, particularly the way her workout leggings fit perfectly. Before she made it to the door, I impulsively called her. "I know this might seem desperate," I said with a nervous laugh, "but how about Thursday evening?" She turned around, her smile widening. "Thursday at 7 sounds great. I'll meet you at L." Needless to say, my workout that evening felt fantastic. When Thursday night came, I arrived at L 10 minutes early, finding a small table in the back. I ordered a slice of cheesecake while I waited. Just 2 minutes later, Molly arrived, her long blonde hair pulled back into a sleek ponytail. She wore tight jean shorts and a cropped t-shirt that didn't quite meet the top of her shorts, showing off the results of her gym sessions. I had to admit she looked incredible. Molly walked toward me at the cafe, and I couldn't help but notice how her braless chest bounced slightly as she sat down. She caught me looking and raised an eyebrow with a playful smirk. I smiled back, trying to act casual. We spent the next 2 hours eating cheesecake, sipping coffee, and talking. I found myself completely bewitched by her. This vibrant, energetic woman who wasn't much older than my daughters. I couldn't tell if she was as interested in me as I was in her, but when she agreed to see me again the following week, I took it as a good sign. The next Saturday, we visited the antique car museum, followed by dinner at a cozy restaurant. Afterward, we returned to my apartment, and the rest, as they say, is history. For a man my age, it was reassuring to know that I still had something left in the tank. While I was falling asleep with a sense of satisfaction, Tracy was driving home, alone and frustrated. Earlier that evening, she had hooked up with a younger guy she'd met at a bar. He was eager and energetic, but for some reason the spark wasn't there. As she drove, Tracy glanced at her reflection in the rearview mirror. She still liked what she saw. Her figure was enviable, her skin still radiant, but something felt off. Carl, her longtime lover, had broken up with her a month earlier. He told her he wanted to start dating someone interested in marriage and children. Two things Tracy couldn't offer. Carl had been kind about the breakup, but Tracy was still reeling from being dumped twice in such a short time. First by Mark, now by Carl. She tried to rationalize Carl's departure by admitting to herself that their time together had grown stale. But deep down, a thought lingered. This shouldn't happen to someone like me. As she pulled into her driveway, she wondered if it was time to consider dating men closer to her age. Maybe they wouldn't be as physically exciting, but at least she might care about what they had to say. Spending time with Molly only reinforced something I'd long suspected about Tracy. From my limited experience before meeting her, I always felt Tracy wasn't as good in bed as others I'd been with. I truly believed it was because she had been treated like a goddess her entire life. Women like Tracy don't have to work hard to attract men, so they don't feel the need to put much effort into intimacy. At first, this doesn't matter. Guys are thrilled just to be with someone so beautiful. But after a while, the novelty wears off, especially if the woman is selfish and doesn't give much back. Over the years, I tried to gently discuss this with Tracy, but I could never bring myself to be brutally honest. I loved her, so I just accepted it. But Judy, Katie, and now Molly had shown me what a truly great intimate connection could be. As I lay in bed that night, I couldn't help but think about how Tracy had tricked me into settling for less for all those years. 2 weeks later, my phone rang. I was surprised to see Tracy's name on the screen. I hadn't spoken to her in months, and when I was with my daughters, they avoided mentioning her out of respect for my boundaries. From the beginning, I'd made it clear to them. My relationship with their mother was over, and they needed to respect that. To their credit, they had done so. "Mark," Tracy began, her tone surprisingly neutral. "April wants to know if we can be civil enough to get through her wedding. Looks like Robert finally popped the question, and she wants us both there, but only if we can behave." I paused for a moment before answering. "Well, I haven't heard from April yet, but you can assure her I'll be the perfect gentleman. And, Tracy, for what it's worth, I'll always remember you as the woman I once loved." When April called the next day to share her news, I gave her the same answer. She told me her mother would be helping plan the wedding, and I encouraged her to enjoy the process. "Have the time of your life, sweetheart," I told her, "and let me know what you need. I'm happy to help pay for anything." I'm not usually an emotional person, but when the big day came and I walked April down the aisle, it hit me like a wave. My little girl, the same one who used to sing silly songs and obsess over toys, had grown into a beautiful, confident woman. She was radiant both inside and out. The walk down the aisle lasted only a couple of minutes, but in those 30 steps, I saw a lifetime of memories flash before my eyes. From her first steps to her first heartbreak, I relived every moment of her growing up. When I handed her off to Robert at the altar, tears streamed down my face. Happy tears. Proud tears. After the ceremony, I walked over to where Tracy was sitting. I hadn't spoken to her much that day, and I could tell she was avoiding me. But as I approached, she looked up and met my eyes. For a brief moment, I saw something in her expression. A mix of regret and longing. Maybe she was thinking about the life we had shared, the family we had built, and what we had lost. Or maybe she was just jealous of the fact that I seemed at peace while she looked like a shadow of the confident woman she once was. "Mark," she said softly, almost nervously, "thank you for being here. I wouldn't have missed it for the world, I replied. No matter what happened between us, we raised an amazing daughter. That's what matters. Tracy kissed me warmly on the cheek as I stood beside her, tears glistening in both our eyes. It was a bittersweet moment, and we shared a connection we hadn't felt in years as we watched April celebrate her big day. Our father-daughter dance went well. We waltzed to a classic tune, and I couldn't help but feel a surge of pride as I led my little girl, now a grown woman, across the floor. Robert and his mother, Isabel, followed with a foxtrot for the mother-son dance. After that, the music shifted to modern tracks, and the dance floor quickly filled with people in their 20s and 30s, laughing and dancing the night away. I stepped back, content to watch for a while, and retreated to the bar. Nursing a single malt scotch, I leaned against the counter for about 10 minutes before I made my move. Tracy was slow dancing with one of the younger guests, one of the 30-somethings milling around the hall. I approached, cutting in with a smile. "Do you mind if I intervene?" I asked him politely. The young man hesitated, embarrassed, but Tracy lit up like a Christmas tree. She extended her hand toward me, making the decision for him. "You don't trust me with these kids, do you?" she teased as I took her hand, pulling her close. "Thanks to you," I replied with a smirk. Half the population knows that the young man I just sent away was hoping to leave tonight with the mother of the bride. "If that's what you want, I can bring him back," I added with mock seriousness. "But I thought you'd enjoy talking and dancing with someone who doesn't think Beyoncé is a living legend." "Touché," she laughed. "Well, unless you pull out a knife and kill me right here on the dance floor, I think we've been pretty good this weekend, haven't we?" I smiled at her, noting the slight trace of nervousness in her voice. "I think we've done fine," I agreed, though for a moment, I thought the bride was going to have a panic attack when she saw me walking toward you. Tracy giggled. "Well, we haven't exactly been model exes, have we?" "No," I admitted, "but at least we waited until the kids were out of the house before everything exploded." We danced through a couple of slow songs, moving in sync with an ease that surprised me. When the music sped up, Tracy's previous dance partner returned and politely asked if he could cut in. To her surprise, I agreed and handed her off graciously. I returned to the table where Allison was sitting, her eyes fixed on the dance floor. Without looking at me, she spoke in a dry, joking tone. "You think we'll have to worry about men stalking Mom when she's in a nursing home?" I glanced sideways at her, trying to gauge her expression. Her tone was light, but her eyes told a different story. "What about you, Dad?" she asked, finally turning toward me. "Mom says you date from time to time, but replacing her seems to be an impossible task." I smiled at her, my voice calm. "I'm fine, baby. Better than fine, actually. And for the record, your mom doesn't know as much about my life now as she thinks she does. But I'll say this. I'm not trying to replace her." Just then, Wendy Adams approached our table. Wendy and her late husband, Earl, had been close friends of ours for years. Earl and I had been best friends, and while Wendy and Tracy stayed in touch, I rarely saw her anymore. Wendy was a couple of years younger than me, and judging by the way her dress hugged her figure, she had kept herself in great shape. "Mind if I borrow your dad for a bit?" Wendy asked Allison with a smile, gesturing toward the dance floor. Allison raised an eyebrow but quickly smiled. "Go on, you two. Shake a leg." As Wendy led me to the dance floor, Allison grabbed my hand and whispered, "Coincidences like this only happen in movies, Dad." We danced to a couple of songs before heading to the bar, where we sat in the comfortable chairs just outside the room. We talked casually for a while, reminiscing about Earl and catching up on each other's lives. Then Wendy surprised me by taking my hand, her expression turning serious. "Mark, she said softly, her blue eyes locking onto mine. Are you still in love with her? Because if you are, I don't want to make a fool of myself by inviting you to dinner. I blinked, caught off guard. Wendy had always been lovely, but I'd never considered pursuing anything with her. She had been so close to Tracy that the thought seemed almost taboo. Still, I couldn't deny that her question struck a chord. I'll always love her to some extent, I admitted after a moment. Maybe it's like a bad habit I can't quite shake. But no, I'm not in love with her anymore. And I definitely don't love her with all my soul. That part's gone. I hesitated, then added, but you and Tracy, I don't want to create any problems between you two. Wendy smiled softly, shaking her head. Mark, I'm not a girl anymore. I've been alone for 8 years now, and there aren't many men I'm interested in. I'm not going to say no to someone just because they're in the same room as me. She leaned forward slightly, her voice warm but firm. Tracy let you go. It's been, 3 years since the divorce? I'm not going to waste time worrying about what she thinks. I've spent enough time alone. I stared at her, my heart pounding slightly. For the first time in years, I realized I felt something more than just friendship. Wendy wasn't just the wife of my best friend anymore. She was a beautiful, confident woman who deserved happiness as much as anyone else. You're like the #1 draft pick in the League of Fantasy Husbands, if only such a league existed, Wendy said with a teasing smile as she handed me back my phone. So, no, Mark, I'm not going to lose a second of sleep worrying about what Tracy might think about you and me dating, and other things. Her cheeks flushed slightly as she said the last part. In that moment, I found myself really wanting to be the person Wendy trusted to get back on the horse, so to speak. I entered her number into my phone as April and Robert stepped out of the reception hall, looking for me. April recognized Wendy immediately, and the two of them exchanged a few pleasantries before Wendy excused herself. Go on, Mark, she said softly. Go play father of the bride some more. I took her hands in mine and leaned down, pressing a quick but meaningful kiss on her lips. To be continued, I whispered as Wendy blushed and smiled, walking away. The rest of the evening was a whirlwind of wedding traditions. Cutting the cake, toasting the happy couple, and plenty of dancing. I couldn't help but notice that Tracy was glued to my side for most of the night. I suspected April might have mentioned my conversation with Wendy, and judging by Tracy's behavior, a flicker of jealousy had been ignited. I'd be lying if I said it didn't flatter me. 3 years after our divorce, it seemed Tracy still cared, even if just a little. Later in the evening, April and Robert returned to the hall, and April wasted no time approaching her mother. She casually mentioned that she and Robert had just interrupted me and Wendy during what looked like an intimate conversation, and that we had kissed. Allison chimed in, adding that she'd been watching Wendy and me on the dance floor earlier. She looked like a teenager in love, Allison had said, smiling, but judging by the look on Tracy's face, she didn't find it cute at all. After ensuring everything at the reception was taken care of, Tracy and I were left alone in the hotel lobby. Knowing she had taken a taxi, I offered to drive her home. She hesitated, then agreed on the condition that I let her buy me a drink at the hotel bar first. Considering this was the best we'd gotten along in years, I accepted. We walked to the bar and sat down at a small table. When the waitress came by, I ordered, "The lady will have bourbon on the rocks, and I'll just have Staley." "It's nice that you still remember, Mark," Tracy said, a small smile playing on her lips. "You're still the only woman I've ever seen who knows how to drink whiskey properly," I replied. Tracy hesitated, then blurted out, "Are you going to have fun with Wendy Adams?" Her cheeks flushed as soon as the words left her mouth. I mean, are you going to date her?" she stammered, clearly embarrassed. "I didn't mean for it to come out like that." I set my glass down, meeting her glowing blue eyes. The silence between us stretched for a long moment as I formulated my response. "That's a nice try, Tracy," I said finally. "But let's not forget who was sowing their wild oats while we were still married. To this day, you've never explained why you treated me with such disrespect. I would have been perfectly happy to grow old with you." Her face softened, and she sighed deeply. Okay, she said quietly. "I made a mistake. A terrible, stupid mistake." I raised an eyebrow, unsure where this was going. Tracy continued, her voice filled with regret. "I was afraid of getting old. I got carried away with the thrill of being with a young guy. I needed to prove to myself that I could still attract men like I used to. But in reality, it wasn't about the intimacy. It was the excitement of someone new, someone young, wanting me. I wasn't smart enough to realize it back then." Her voice cracked as she went on. "When I started comparing them to you, well, at first I thought they were better. They were younger, more energetic. And the fact that you were just so sweet and innocent while I was doing what I was doing made me think you were weak. But I was wrong. So wrong." She wiped at her eyes, tears beginning to spill. "After you left, the thrill of the game disappeared. And after a while, even the thrill of being with someone new disappeared. Sure, it was an ego boost to have someone half my age want me. But it wasn't real. Nothing emotional ever happened." Her voice dropped to a whisper. "Damn it, Mark. I'd kill just for a hug at night. I miss what we had." I took a deep breath, staring into my glass. "Have you thought about dating someone your own age? Someone who's in your league. Someone who knows how life works, even if he can't hit the high notes like the kids you've been chasing?" Tracy nodded, her expression firm. "That's what I'm trying to do now, Mark. I'm trying to be smarter, to stop running away from my mistakes." Her voice broke again. "We had 30 good years together. Can you forgive my terrible judgment and give us another chance? Please." Everything that had happened, Tracy's tears, her desperate apology, made part of me want to hold her and promise to make everything better. But in the end, I couldn't. 3 years ago, this might have felt like a victory, but now, it was just a desperate plea for reconciliation. I shook my head slowly and spoke with as much kindness as I could muster. "First of all, Tracy, we didn't have 30 good years together, maybe 29 at best. I wouldn't call the last year a good one by any stretch. But this is real life. And in real life, we don't always get second chances." I stood, helping her up as I continued. "Come on, let's get you home." A week after the wedding, I finally called Wendy Adams. We went to a charming seafood restaurant a couple of towns over. She wore a stunning, tight dress that turned heads all night. But what impressed me the most was that Wendy didn't even seem to notice. Unlike Tracy, whose confidence fed on the attention of others, Wendy's focus stayed solely on me. We shared a delicious meal and great conversation. And when the night was over, we went back to her house for after-dinner drinks and dessert. Wendy poured us each a glass of cognac, which we sipped slowly, savoring the moment. When the glasses were empty, she stood, took my hand, and quietly led me upstairs. She brought me into a guest bedroom, not the master bedroom she once shared with Earl. I understood immediately. This wasn't about replacing memories. It was about creating new ones. Wendy didn't need to ask me to be gentle. I could tell she hadn't been with many, if any, men since Earl's passing. They had been deeply in love, and I respected her for taking her time to heal. That night, she looked like an angel, and I lay awake for at least 10 minutes, just watching her sleep. In the 3 years since my divorce, I had experienced an incredible intimate renaissance, enjoying the company of women of all ages. But with Wendy, it felt different. There was something deeper, an emotional connection I hadn't expected. As I drifted off, I wondered if she felt the same way. I woke the next morning to the smell of frying bacon and fresh coffee. It was no longer unusual for me to wake up in a strange bed. But this morning felt different. Felt peaceful. Almost like those lazy Sunday mornings from my past, when Tracy would be downstairs cooking breakfast and the girls would be playing at her feet. But this time there was no Tracy, no laughter, just Wendy. I threw on a t-shirt and some trousers, still half asleep, and stumbled downstairs. And there she was, wearing my shirt, rolled up at the sleeves and buttoned only halfway down. Her legs were bare, and the sight of her took my breath away. My shirt had never looked better. "Hey, Sonia," she teased, using the name I had called her jokingly the night before. "I hope you don't mind me borrowing this. It smelled like you, and I wanted to keep it on for a while." "Well, in that case, how about some breakfast?" I asked, grinning. "Can a starving man get a little attention?" Wendy smiled mischievously, sidling toward me as I opened my arms wide and pulled her into a tight hug. She smelled like us, like the night before, and I couldn't imagine a better scent in the world. As she melted into my embrace, I made a soft, contented sound, and she answered with one of her own. We ate breakfast together, discussing our plans for the day. It was Saturday and we had nothing pressing to do, so we talked about what we would do. Not what I or she would do. We made a few casual plans, but then I had a flash of inspiration. "This might sound completely stupid," I began, looking at her seriously, "but how about we get married today?" Wendy froze for a second, her eyes wide with surprise. Then she broke into a radiant smile. "You have an excellent IQ," she said playfully. "I'll do whatever you think is best." It was that simple. I knew the local justice of the peace had Saturday office hours, so I called to check if he was available at 4 p.m. He was. That left us just over 7 hours to prepare. I needed a best man, and Wendy's 28-year-old son, Aaron, was more than happy to step in. When I explained that the bride was his mother, he laughed and said he, his wife, and their 2-year-old daughter would make the drive to attend the ceremony. Wendy called her mother to ask her to be her maid of honor. Her phone was on speaker, and my future mother-in-law burst into tears, barely able to choke out a yes. I called both of my daughters, inviting April, Robert, Allison, and anyone else they wanted to bring as their plus ones. Wendy hesitated for a moment before asking, "Do you think I should invite Tracy? I mean, she is the mother of your children." I shook my head. "Only if you really want to. But honestly, I'd rather you didn't. She's had a rough time lately, and I don't want it to look like I'm throwing my happiness in her face." One of my best friends owned a nice restaurant in town, so I gave him a quick call and asked if he could host a small, last-minute wedding reception. He was happy to help, and with a few phone calls, everything was in place. By 4 p.m., Wendy and I stood hand in hand in the small office of the Justice of the Peace, surrounded by her son, her mother, my daughters, and a few close friends. Wendy wore a simple white dress she'd bought that afternoon, and I'd never seen her look more beautiful. When the justice pronounced us husband and wife, I felt a wave of happiness wash over me. A happiness I hadn't felt in years. Wendy and I kissed, and for the first time in a long time, I felt like I had truly found a partner. That evening, as we celebrated with our small group of family and friends, I couldn't help but think about how far I'd come since the end of my marriage to Tracy. Life had taken unexpected turns, but sitting there with Wendy by my side, I realized that sometimes the best things come when you least expect them. I called one of my best friends who owned a nice restaurant and asked if his banquet room was available for the day. He told me he'd be happy to host and help with arrangements, so I booked the room immediately. Wendy and I then invited a few close friends and family members who we thought would enjoy celebrating this wonderful occasion with us. Afterward, I went to the best jewelry store in town to buy engagement and wedding rings. As fate would have it, Tracy was leaving her favorite boutique with shopping bags in hand when she nearly ran into Wendy on the sidewalk. Though their friendship had faded over the years, they had known each other for about 25 years and still exchanged pleasantries when they crossed paths. They chatted amiably for a few minutes before Tracy's eyes landed on Wendy's left hand. She froze, noticing the 2 rings on Wendy's finger. "My God, girl, those rings are absolutely amazing," she exclaimed. Wendy blushed deeply, but Tracy's expression quickly changed as the realization dawned on her. Are you married to Mark?" she stammered, her voice unsteady. Tracy swayed slightly, and Wendy quickly grabbed her by the shoulders to steady her. "I didn't know. I'm really sorry, Tracy," Wendy apologized gently. "We didn't really talk about it much. It all happened so fast." "It's certainly not like the Mark I know," Tracy replied, her voice trembling as she tried to compose herself. Wendy continued, her voice soft and kind. "Have you ever had the feeling that something was so right you just had to do it? I mean, who would let a man like that get away?" She paused, realizing the weight of her words, and quickly added, "Oh, Tracy, that's not what I meant. Honestly, I'm so sorry." Tracy waved off the apology, her tone resigned. "It's okay, Wendy. Trust me, I know I'm an idiot. Learn from my mistakes and never let this man get away." Later that day, Tracy sat in her therapist's office, venting her frustrations to Dr. Ellen McForrest. "I was so stupid," Tracy admitted. "I decided to leave Mark, thinking I'd have a chance with all these great guys. But they just disappeared." Dr. McForrest nodded thoughtfully. "You're a smart woman, Tracy, but surely you must realize there aren't many good single men at your age. And from what you've told me, you didn't even try to fish in those waters. Did you really believe you could catch a young, talented guy and keep him? Sooner or later, you'd actually have to talk to him, build a life with him, not just have fun for a night." Tracy sighed deeply. "God, Doc, real life sucks sometimes." Now, 10 years later, I'm standing on the back porch of the house Wendy and I bought shortly after we got married. For many reasons, we decided to start fresh with a new home. It's smaller, with only 2 bedrooms, but it has a large living room and family room. Plenty of space to host our 3 kids and their families when they visit. We've already been blessed with 6 grandchildren, and life couldn't be better. I'm grilling on the porch when Wendy comes out with 2 glasses of whiskey on the rocks. She hands me one, and I give her a quick kiss on the lips. Even now, at 63, she looks 20 years younger. She still takes excellent care of herself. Her light brown hair has a touch of gray, but she can still turn heads when she dresses up for a casual night out. Hey, we may be old, but we're not dead yet. In fact, we still enjoy each other's company in every way. Twice a week in the bedroom, and sometimes a little fun in the shower. Medical science truly is a gift from God. Though I once loved Tracy with all my heart during our marriage, I can't imagine spending the rest of my life with anyone but Wendy. She captured my heart in a way Tracy never could. In some strange, twisted way, I should be grateful that Tracy cheated on me. Without that pain, I never would have found this joy. I run into Tracy every few months. She hasn't looked good in a long time. There's always a sadness in her eyes, and she constantly apologizes. Part of me thinks about it every time, but I'm too polite to ever say, "Thank you." Still, the thought lingers. At 65, Tracy's once famous features have softened. Her large breasts no longer rise as high, though a good support bra helps. Her once envied figure has returned to its cheesecake shape, and she's painfully aware that men no longer notice her as she walks through the mall. One day, as she headed to her car in the parking lot, she saw me walking toward her. Straightening her posture, she tried to look her best as I approached. "Hello, beautiful," I said affably, leaning down to kiss her on the cheek. Tracy blushed at the compliment, her face lighting up for a brief moment. We engaged in small talk for a few minutes, mostly about our shared grandchildren, before I checked my watch and said, "Well, I'd better get going." Tracy hesitated as I started to leave. "Mark," she called softly, her voice tinged with regret. I'm really sorry." I paused, looking directly into her eyes. There was a long silence as I considered my response. Finally, I smiled gently, but I said nothing. Without a word, I got into my car and drove off, moving forward, just as I had so many years ago. What do you think of our story today? I loved it because of its unusual and heartfelt plot. What's your opinion? Share your thoughts in the comments below. If you enjoyed this, subscribe to JK Tells a Story for more tales.